Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community, and today we're going to discuss really powerlifting news, right? So we're going to get into, which is my sport of choice. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. It would be greatly appreciated. You guys know there's a group of guys who sit there and run a dislike bot first thing in the morning when these come up. If you help offset those, it would be greatly appreciated. It won't take anything out of your day to click that button. So thank you if you do that. But I saw something that's been linked to me by a number of people, and I probably would have found it on my own anyway, because I've been looking into some stuff by J.M. Blakely lately. In fact, I've been looking at what he's saying about the J.M. press, which is named after him, even though he didn't invent it. It's named after him. And I'm actually going to be changing the way I do J.M. presses, because what he had to say on it makes a lot of sense. He's made the lift famous. He used it to build one hell of a bench press. And I know that triceps are my weak link personally in all my pressing movements. So, I mean, I've been actually looking into stuff he's been saying lately. And for people who want to understand kind of who he is, you go back and look, this is a guy who in the late 90s did a 700-pound bench press multiply. Now, people say, but guys are doing that with 1,000 pounds today. Right, but this is the 90s shirt technology. What you need to understand is that a multiply shirt in the 90s didn't give you 300 pounds onto your bench press. It didn't give you 400 pounds on your bench press. I doubt he was getting 100 pounds out of that shirt. In other words, this is a guy who probably, while weighing about 300, had a legitimate 600 plus bench. He probably could bench over 600 raw. I don't know what his exact raw numbers were, but I'd estimate based upon the shirts back then versus today. It's a totally different beast. So that we're talking about a legitimately strong guy who's gone on to be himself a very successful coach. I believe he even has a PhD in the field of exercise science. And he basically got into a discussion with Dave Tate. And you can tell Dave doesn't like it because Dave's big on speed work. And he made an argument against speed work for powerlifting. And he makes valid points. But I think the point that we need to come around to and understand is that Conjugate is not a powerlifting system. Okay? It's a point I've been making repeatedly as someone who runs it myself. I run it for clients. None of my clients are competing in powerlifting. I have clients who compete in other stuff. Conjugate is generally the best template for athletes. Okay, it's generally the best template for athletes. Then you adapt it and specialize it to your individual sport. In other words, there are people who are successfully running Conjugate who are everyone from MMA fighters to boxers to NFL players. Again, DeFranco uses this system to get his guys ready for the combine. He's been doing it over a decade. Basketball players, baseball players, Army Rangers, right? It's an all-encompassing system. And I've said it's generally the best way to train for athletes. What Blakely is saying is that the speed strength component may not be helpful for all powerlifters. And you've got to remember there also, let's step back and think about what Louis Simmons always says with his guys. He's like, look, we cater to people's weaknesses. If you have a guy who's strong, we need to make him faster. If he's not fast enough, if you have a guy who's fast, we need to make him stronger. So the system is designed to work all these different elements, and that's the point. And it's not that powerlifting is a speed strength sport. It's not. It's not. Powerlifting is a brute strength sport, and that's what I've tried to tell people. Powerlifting is currently, based upon any sport that we have, the best judge of strength. Okay, that is what it measures. There is no current other system of sport in place with a measurement that measures strength as effectively as powerlifting does. Period. Full stop. And I've broken down why in the past in a lot of detail. For people who want to argue that point, I will destroy you on that point. You don't have anything else that compares. And notice I didn't say the bench press, I said powerlifting, the combined total. That's critical because it removes genetic leverage advantages by being forced to compare all three lifts, because some people will be great at the deadlift or great at the bench and suck at everything else due to structures, genetics. To be good at all three, you basically have to have maximum strength, maximum body composition. And let's come over to the point. So what makes us good at the big three? Learning to do maxes, lifting maximally, and having maximized body composition. And notice the body composition, not muscle, because you're in a weight class. Okay, you're competing in weight classes. Open-ended, you just need to be as stacked and jacked and as big as possible. You're in a weight class, you need to have the most muscle in your weight class, period. Most muscle in your weight class. If you're an inch shorter with 5 pounds more muscle than everybody you're competing again in a weight class, you are probably going to win if you're good at maxing. If you practice maxing out, you're going to win. That's what powerlifting is measuring. Brute strength. And brute strength comes 80 to 90% of it comes from your muscle tissue relative to the size of your frame. Everything else, that last 10 to 20%, is how good you are at maxing out. A little bit is technique. Technique makes up less than 10%. Someone with a piss poor squat form isn't going to take a 500-pound squat with terrible form and just clean their form up and go to 600. It doesn't work that way. Someone with terrible squat form who can max 500 is going to maybe get 530 with really good form coaching. That's what's going to happen. You don't go up 100 pounds. It's a brute strength sport. That's all it is. It measures brute strength. And the weight classes are there to get it relative and to basically sort you by height more than anything else. Sort you by height or sort you by level of gear abuse. But it's a strength sport. It's a pure strength sport. And it's the best measure we currently have out of any current sport that we use to measure it. And the point he makes is that the speed strength doesn't matter. Well, he might be right for some people. I personally feel that I benefited from speed work. Guys, friends with Clint Darden. Clint Darden's an awesome guy. Clint Darden is a massive proponent of speed work. And for good reason. For good reason. But let's come over to the point. If a person didn't want to do speed work, he basically says we do need to work on getting good year round. Well, if they didn't want to work on the speed work component, let's say someone wanted to keep the pure form of Conjugate and they don't care about being explosive and athletic. So you wanted to remove that component. I would say you still need the other 3 windows. And I would say, what did he talk about? Well, really, if you're wasting speed work and taking time away from lifting heavy weights, you may not be progressing, and we're just limited on how much heavy weights we can lift. And I would agree with that. But his proposed alternative just falls back into doing rep work, doing a bunch of 6s. That's not lifting maximum weight either. You don't get maximum strength from that. If you're doing a bunch of 6s, you're getting hypertrophy. And I'm not saying what he's saying is wrong. I'm not saying people shouldn't listen. But what I would almost say is what I've considered and more or less hinted with certain people. Look at what guys like Jamie Lewis and a lot of guys like out there do that. The Conjugate system of coming in and just hitting maxes all the time is used by other people who don't necessarily buy into Conjugate, but they don't do the Bulgarian style where it's just 4 lifts. The random lift method, where you come in and you have 30 different maxes you do. Okay, that would work. And the reason for it is that you don't burn out, you don't get overuse injury, you don't run into the problems from maxing out if you change your lift every time. If a person wanted to swap out the speed work for extra max work, because you only hit 1 max in a day, not like you're hitting multiple exercises, they could get away with that. If you wanted to take his argument to the purest level, that's what a person would do. They just have 4 max effort days, 2 upper, 2 lowers, with random rotating lifts to where you might not even hit the same lift but once every 12 weeks. You're going to need a lot of different exercises. The only way that's going to work is if you have access to a lot of bars, chains, bands, pads. Basically, if your gym looked like mine looks, your gym does, you could pull this off. You're going to need a lot of exercise variation. But you could do it that way and then just do tons of the repetition method behind it. Because what do you need to be good at? Pure brute strength. You need to be good at maxing out. And if you're going to max out a lot, you would need a lot more variation to avoid getting stale, to avoid stagnation, regression, overuse injuries. The problems you run into from maxing out come from maxing on the same lift. You're basically going to need something like 40 different exercises. It's basically the only way that's going to work. And then you could do the normal repetition method behind it and then your GPP to get conditioned. You could do that and then you could focus on just hypertrophy and maximum strength. That would work too. That would work. If someone wanted to follow this system for pure powerlifting and they didn't care about the speed strength because they're strong and they're fast enough, as Blakely said, because he's basically just subbing out sets of 6 for the speed work with heavier weight. It's what he's more or less recommending. in its own progression. I mean, you could do the other approach, and there are people who are brutally strong who do use that sort of approach. Again, think of like the chaos and pain type system, what Jamie Lewis has always done. Who, if you look, people thought of him as just doing the max singles, but it's not. Jamie does a lot of training volumes, always promoted it. His whole company promotes it. You'd be shifting more in the direction of what they kind of do, maxing out on random stuff more or less all the time, and then doing a bunch of hypertrophy volume behind it. That would actually work if you programmed it carefully and looked at total volumes and everything else. You could run the conjugate system simply like that because it's still conjugate. You're rotating maxes all the time, rotating exercises. Someone could do something like that, and it might be viable. I've considered it, but I know that I get a lot out of speed work. I personally feel that I benefit from speed work. I feel like it's really made a difference on my squatting and deadlifting, at least. Just me personally. And so he's not necessarily wrong regarding the fact that powerlifting isn't a speed strength sport. But I think what people need to understand is that the conjugate system is designed to make people all around strong and powerful athletes. And it's just happened to be implemented very effectively by a lot of powerlifters. Okay? Because that's where its origin was. But it's an all-encompassing athletic system that is fine-tuned to your sport-specific need. It's generally the way I would have anybody train. Anybody who's capable of doing conjugate, I would push them in the direction of doing it as their base starting point template. Because it works, and it will make you strong and athletic and explosive. Right? And it will. It's proven. It's been proven in dozens of different sports at this point. It works. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.